Good morning, and thank you for keeping it Citizen Television this particular Wednesday morning. It's usually a time for us to look at our health and wellness on the second segment of the program. And we have had doctors in studio talk about different conditions, and even people who have been survivors of those conditions come in studio every week just to shed light on several diseases and how we can be able to manage them. And we hope that wherever you're watching, you're learning and you're also helping us to pass the information that we share each and every week on this platform. And we welcome you to share with us any suggestion of any condition that you'd like us to bring an expert in studio to discuss, and we will be able to do that on your behalf. But this week, we want to talk about epilepsy awareness. And I'm having in studio with me this morning Reverend Frederick Beuchi. Frederick Beuchi is an epilepsy counselor and awareness activist. He also serves as the National Secretary of the National Epilepsy Coordination Committee. Thank you so much for creating time this morning.
Thank you so much for having me on studio again today.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
So, you know, every time we usually think that the time we should be having this conversation is around when we are marking,
when we are having
the Epilepsy Day.
Yeah,
but we decided to do something different, considering the lack of information that is out there, the stigma, the myths, the misinformation that is going around with regards to epilepsy, and just get to break it down and simplify for our viewers to understand what it is and how it's managed. And I'd like us to just start by, because the overall aim of this particular segment for me would be, you know, creating awareness to the level where people who have epilepsy will be able to come out of their protective shells without shame, without stigma. But then what you do on a regular basis is helping communities understand exactly how to help people do that. So I want us to start from the very basic. What is epilepsy? Exactly, you know.
Thank you so much. I was following the conversation that we were having earlier here with the doctors, and it's good to acknowledge that we are still in the looming crisis of, you know, the strike, and hoping that it's going to get over soon. As I've said, I serve as a chaplain of the Maua Methodist Hospital, and where I serve, I also am in charge of the medical students and intern doctors. So I honestly understand what is happening at the moment, and that's why it's good to start by acknowledging. But aside from that, now that we are talking about epilepsy, it's good that you have mentioned that we have come to a point where we are discussing about epilepsy, not necessarily because it's November, which is regarded as the Epilepsy Awareness Month, and February, when we are celebrating the International Epilepsy Day. It has come to a point where it's a continuous conversation that we should be having like every day. And starting with the basics, epilepsy is a neurological condition, disorder. It is being caused by the damage of the brain. So at any point where someone gets a damage of the brain, either this can be caused by accidents, and someone gets a head injury and it touches the brain, it can put them into a risk of getting epilepsy. But we are also talking of infectious diseases like cerebral malaria. We are talking about meningitis. It is also good to know that there are other causes that we can't really determine, or when someone has epilepsy, we are unable to tell like how it came about. But after some tests, of course, we are able to know what type of epilepsy that one has.
All right. We'll talk about the types and even how to diagnose. But before we get to that point, you talk about seizures. Do we have types of seizures? How do they present, so that at least we can be able to differentiate, or even know if somebody around us, or even if it is yourself, you're going through that particular?
Well, epilepsy, again, as we continue with its definition, it presents in different ways.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that epilepsy presents is through the presence of seizure attack or convulsions, as you might say. But also it presents with a lot of what we might call abnormal behaviors that might not necessarily be seizures or convulsions. So in that way, then, we narrow it down to a point where we say we have so many types, but they have been categorized into what we call generalized seizures, partial seizures, and absence seizures. And when we talk of the many types, there are over 40 types, but categorized, exactly, but categorized in these three categories that I have just mentioned. So if we talk about generalized seizure, it would be the normal, when you ask someone what is epilepsy, they will tell you that condition where somebody gets an attack, they fall down and they jerk. Some get some kind of foam coming out, they smack their lips or bite their tongue. That's the normal one that people would say. And when you talk about absence seizure, this might not necessarily mean that someone will get an attack and they'll fall down, but you could be talking to someone, and especially this is in children, and they are looking at you, and for a minute they are giving you a blank stare, and when you are asking them a question, they would come back to their senses again and they would ask, like, what were you asking? Exactly. And then we have partial seizure, where somebody doesn't necessarily have to like fall down, but they'll have either a movement of a limb or jerking on one side, or shaking of the head or shaking of the leg for some minutes or seconds, and then it eases down. And we say a seizure most of the time might last between 3 to 5 minutes. It might reoccur after that, but it always causes an alarm when it goes past 5 minutes or so. Then at that point we can begin to, say this could be a potential epilepsy condition. Therefore, we need to take them to the hospital to get them checked. Yes.
And I just wanted to ask, does it have to happen like a series of seizures, or anytime you get a seizure, you should be concerned?
And that's why I'm talking about the duration. Because a seizure mostly would last between 3 to 5 minutes at most. There are those that happen in seconds. Like when you talk about absence seizure, actually you might not even be able to tell sometimes, or the jerking where we're talking about the partial seizure. But there is a recurring of these seizures happening over time, and that's where it will have to be determined again whether the persistence of that seizure is actually resulting to one having epilepsy. It's good to understand that also convulsions happens over and above other conditions, right? So you might not really want to say because one got a seizure or a convulsion, then that automatically becomes epilepsy. At the hospital, and just like any other condition, we always emphasize that people go for checkups. There's a test that is done called EEG. It's able to also determine what sizable injury of the brain has or damage, and what part of the brain has actually been affected to be causing those or that kind of seizure.
So epilepsy is a condition that cannot be diagnosed or treated over the counter. Yeah?
We
have to go to the hospital.
You have to go to the hospital. You can't really assume, and it's unfortunate that we can allude this to the lack of information. I mean, whereby when a person begins to experience that, and that's where we talk about actually the stigma and myths and misconceptions around epilepsy in itself. I mean, look at when a person has a stomach ache or a headache, they easily either go to the chemist or to the shop and they get maybe a painkiller and they take. But for epilepsy, in the manner in which it shows itself, it presents itself, people either rush to prayers or they rush to, the traditional doctors. And I'm not disputing prayers because I'm a reverend. And
I was kind of like, okay.
And I pray for people, right? But the reason why I have been in this space advocating for epilepsy awareness for over 10 years right now, it's because I am a caregiver. I have a sister who was diagnosed with epilepsy when she was 2 years old. She's now 16 years and she has been about seizure-free for about 6 years. And that journey has been all about getting the right and proper medication at the same time, praying for her. And that is what has made
like they say, the doctor treats, God
exactly,
heals.
And
doctor
God
treats,
and God heals.
So both work together. So even as you pray for this person, make sure that they get the proper medication and the proper care that they need for their condition.
Exactly.
All right. So I want us to talk about. Are you born with it or can you acquire it along the way? That's also something that we need to shed light on.
Yeah. So first you realize we are talking about epilepsy being a condition. As opposed to many understanding it as a disease. It's a condition, and this means that anyone at any point in their life can get this condition because the predisposing factors of getting epilepsy, as I have mentioned, it could be either through injuries which are caused by accidents, and they happen so many times, and the infections, and I have just mentioned a few, cerebral malaria or meningitis, and so many people can get that. It also does happen even at birth. Birth complications, sometimes they happen and a child is born, and because of either the prolonged labor that the mother has been into, it can also affect their brain and dispose them to the risk of getting epilepsy. So anyone at any point of their life can actually, they can be at risk of getting epilepsy depending on what they have been exposed to. Prolonged use of also drugs and substance abuse like alcohol and those other drugs that we're talking about can also cause epilepsy at the end of the day. So there are those that can be born with it because of maybe the birth complications that we are talking about, and all these other factors that we have also mentioned to be as a cause.
Can it also be inherited, like probably somebody in the family had, so there are chances that somebody along the line will have? Can that also be a factor?
There's a little percentage of that that we are talking about, and we are many times very careful in trying to explain it because it has a lot of genetic implications for it to come to pass, but we talk about it on a very small percentage being inherited either from one person to another, or if it has been in a lineage of a family. It does happen, but when you look at the causes, you would put that at the very least, because these other causes then come out to be major.
More dominant.
Exactly.
Right. So when we talk about such conditions, we want to know how big the problem is. And probably, do you have an idea of, in terms of, you've even talked about percentages. You can use any ratio or whatever, just to give us some sort of perspective on how common this condition is, especially in Kenya.
In Kenya. Yes, we have statistics in place, but I should also mention that it's been a while since the researches have been done. But at the moment in Kenya, we are talking about around 1.5 million people, living with either one of the types of epilepsies that we have mentioned. Globally, we are talking about 70 million people. So again, when we narrow it down to our country, we are talking of 3 to 4 people in a group of 100 people. They would have either one of the epilepsy types that we have talked about. But again, if you come to think of it, even the 1.5 million people, it's not a small number to be ignored. And the reason why we are still pushing for awareness is because we do understand that the numbers at the moment might be very high, because we have had a lot of predisposing factors that have contributed to the cause of epilepsy. I'm made to understand that tomorrow, being 25th, is World Malaria Day or something, and looking at at the coast region and what we have been talking about malaria, it's been something that we have been fighting for years, but it's yet to leave us. And that could be one of the things that perhaps have contributed largely when it comes to the causes for epilepsy. If I can sample a county that a lot of awareness is being done, and it's because of the cases that are there, it's Kilifi County. And Kilifi County has been said to just be one of the counties that, when it comes to epilepsy cases, there are a lot down there. And we could combine all these causes that we've talked about and say perhaps this is what has contributed. And that's why until today we have a lot of efforts that are being done to actually make sure the word about awareness down there is actually going around.
All right.
Yes.
So as we talk about the stigma that is there, because I'm looking at 1.5 million, and like you say, it's not a small number. And Rev, you'll not be surprised that there are quite a number of people who could be part of this data that are not part of it because of the fear of stigma. They don't easily accept that they have epilepsy, or some don't even know. They've not even gone to the health facility to get that diagnosis. How easy is it? Because you work with the communities a lot. How easy is it for people to accept that, first of all, to accept that they have epilepsy?
To be honest, that's the biggest challenge. And when we're talking about the burden of epilepsy, we cannot overrule the stigma that comes with it. Today, because I'm part of a foundation we call Foundation for People with Epilepsy, based in Malindi. Today we are actually launching a program that we call Stigma Intervention, and we are trying to bring people living with epilepsy and those that do not necessarily live with epilepsy, religious leaders, teachers, caregivers, to make sure that we have an opportunity to start a conversation on how people with epilepsy can actually be viewed and can be taken care of. Because stigma spreads throughout. If a child has epilepsy in school, for example, when they have a seizure, and the notion that if you touch them during that seizure, they might affect or pass it to you, people shun away from them, the students and even the teachers themselves. When you come to family setups, there are people, like I'll tell you, I've been a caregiver of a sister for almost those 16 years. And when one person has epilepsy, indirectly, it affects around 5 people around him. So if the family is not understanding, then this person will also be stigmatized from how they are being taken care of. We have had people who they have qualified for jobs, for example, and the last thing they want to say in a job interview is that I have a condition called epilepsy, because they know the next thing.
The moment you say that,
the moment you say that,
everything goes.
And that's why in this stigma intervention program that we are rolling out for like the next 10 months, we want to actually see how best we can address that. How can we use even people living with epilepsy who have defied all odds, and they are up there. They are teachers, they are lawyers, they are reverends, and they have embraced that condition, and they have shown beyond epilepsy, we are actually normal people, and we should not be stigmatized over anything whatsoever.
I wanted to talk to that person who could be in that space where they are facing that kind of a stigma, or they're even afraid to disclose that they have epilepsy. First of all, why is it important for someone to expose to the people around them that they have epilepsy? Why is that so important? Number two, is it all doom and gloom
for them?
Yeah. Encourage someone.
Okay. Let me say this. It's very important for you to come out, for people to know your status, especially if you have epilepsy. And one reason is because if it's in a setup of a company where you have gotten a job, then the employer has an opportunity to make sure that they create an environment within your working space that is going to be fit for you. And even if it's at a location of, work assignments, they will know we need not to put this one in the machinery area because of the risk of, a seizure coming out. So it's very important. And because of the awareness that we have been doing, people have become more acceptable to the people living with epilepsy. So don't shy away because maybe you will not have an opportunity to be heard or to be accepted. It is very important. And again, people will get to know what to do, for example, because one of the things that we try as much as we can is to help people to understand, for example, the seizure first aid. What needs to be done when someone either gets a seizure, and perhaps we will be able to address or talk about the do's and don'ts for first aid. And that can only come when someone has been able to speak out and say, I have epilepsy, and if anything happens to me, then this is what is supposed to be done. On whether it's the end of the road when someone gets epilepsy, I would say no, because we've had people who have been diagnosed with epilepsy from a very young age. They have embraced the medication journey, and they have made it in life. They are living normal lives. There are people you would see and you wouldn't be able to actually tell whether they have epilepsy because their seizures are controlled and they are now leading a very normal life, even with the fact that they know that they are living with epilepsy. So it's never the end of the road for anyone diagnosed with epilepsy.
There are success stories out there.
Exactly.
People who've thrived.
Very true.
Yeah?
Yeah.
But let's stick on that stigma issue for a while. What are some of the misleading socio-cultural myths or beliefs about epilepsy that concern you most?
Wow. I think top on the list it would be the fact that for the longest time people have been thinking that epilepsy first can be passed from one person to another. That has been top on the list when it comes to people actually looking at epilepsy. And I've had an opportunity to traverse so many communities and interact with them to get to understand. And they say, when a person has this, we cannot eat with them, we cannot share the same bed with them, we cannot, share the same clothing with them because they might actually pass this too. And the other one that is outstanding is when a person has epilepsy and thinking that if I get married to this person with epilepsy, if we are blessed to have a child, then the child might end up getting epilepsy. And the fact that also traditionally people think that, once you get epilepsy, there is no way that you can get treated or managed because there is no medicine. Actually, I've had people who say that when you get a seizure and you fall on fire and you get burnt, that's it. Even the wound that you have cannot heal. And that's not true.
But are these things true, though?
They are not true. They are not true because, and it's good because I'm speaking from experience. I think a few years back, my sister got a seizure and fell on fire. And it was a serious burn. But we treated the burn. We continued with the medication as instructed by the doctor. And the burns healed. And she's on with her life, normal life, as we talk right now. So I know a lot of myths and misconceptions are out there in the community, but what we can say this morning is that if you know anyone with epilepsy, please take them to the hospital. We have advanced medication. We have advanced doctors who can diagnose and treat it properly and avert on the risk now of someone getting into seizures and either falling into water or fire, because that naturally is what would cause either an injury or death. Otherwise, epilepsy in itself, when it is so well managed,
it does not kill.
It does
it's
not
not a
kill.
death sentence.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it has to be managed.
It has
reduce
to
the risk. One thing I learned about what you were saying earlier, they need to disclose even if in case you have epilepsy, they need to disclose to people around you. Is for your own safety.
Exactly.
So then they will know what to do in case you're having that seizure, and then they won't be scared or paranoid and or have all those misconceptions.
Very true.
At least they will know that you have epilepsy, and there are chances that this could happen while you're with them. And if it happens, this and this is what you need to do. So be the champion, be the advocate yourself.
And actually
to the
talking
people
about
you.
what to do, maybe quickly. We have very 5 simple steps when it comes to first aid that you need to do. Number 1, when a seizure happens to a person, you first remain calm because you want to determine what exactly has happened to this person. And then if that seizure has happened in a place where maybe they have fell on in water or on fire, or a place where you have stones, and then you clear the area. The goal is to take them out of danger. And then you look for something soft, you place it beneath their head, because we've talked about it, epilepsy being caused by brain injury. So you want as much as possible to protect the head from getting any further injuries. And if they have their clothes which are tightened, you try and loosen that. And then you, once the seizure is over, you roll them on what we call the recovery position, where you lay them on their side. Remember, I've talked about sometimes we have others that have some kind of foam coming out of their mouth. So if you lay them on their back, then chances are they might choke. But if you lay them on their side, then even the foam can easily come out. And then most importantly, you stay with them until they are fully recovered, because most of the time after that seizure, some of them are a little bit confused, and they might want to either cross the road if they had fallen by the roadside, and they might even get hit by a car. And things that you're not supposed to do is do not put anything in their mouth. And I know
spoon.
This anything, spoon or a pen or a piece of cloth.
People do that. They think it's a way of protecting them from biting their tongue and all that. So it's not advised.
It's not advised, because at the point when they're having a seizure, muscles tighten, and you can imagine trying to put something inside their mouth, and all of a sudden a seizure is over and the muscles loosen. That whatever thing that you're putting inside there might even go deeper and even choke them or even cause death.
So what if they're biting their tongue and all that? You just observe that and do nothing?
Yeah, I know that's the worry of so many people. But you see, when a seizure happens, the first 2-3 seconds, they have already bitten their tongue. It's not going to be like continuous. It might happen over episodes of having that seizure, but it's easier to treat this wound that they would have because of the biting. I know there are others who say they might bite their tongue to an extent of the tongue getting cut off.
Yeah. Those are fears.
Those are fears.
That's why they do what they do.
Yes.
And out of goodwill, without knowing that it's...
Over this period of time that I have been taking care of my sister, I think for her, she has had the worst of the seizures that were happening, which are generalized seizure, where she was getting a seizure like after every 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And she's been biting her tongue, but there is no day that she has swallowed her tongue or she has bitten her tongue to a point of cutting it. So that eventually would be a wound that can be treated. But the aftermath of you trying to push something and then it causes, an injury further than what we imagined, it might be very tragic. So don't try, under any circumstances, don't try to put anything in their mouth. Do not restrain them when they are jacking, calling all family members
to
and
hold them in position.
Don't. That's the only way a seizure can manifest and come out. And when you restrain them, all those shocks end up in their muscles. So even at a point when the seizure is over, they feel so weak and they cannot even stand or walk by themselves. And finally, don't give them any drink or anything at the point when they're having that kind of seizure happening to them. Yeah, so those are simple things that I think people can do when someone has gotten a seizure to help. And if it persists over the 3 to 5 minutes, then that's where now it causes for one to actually either make an alarm for them to be rushed to the hospital.
That is if it goes beyond 5 minutes.
Exactly.
Yeah?
Yes.
All right. So what if it happens, like maybe you are driving and it happens to maybe somebody who was in the car, the car seat, what do you do? Or if you are driving yourself, and then it happens.
I think that brings us to the question of, are there some things that persons with epilepsy are restricted to do? And I would say, like, one of them is, driving. Not like fully restricted not to drive, because when the doctor has been able to ascertain that your seizures are well controlled over a period of time, then you are eligible to actually drive. Okay? And it's good to always be on the lookout, especially if you are living with someone with epilepsy and they are driving, based on how long they have been seizure-free and how their epilepsy is controlled. It might not be advisable to always let them drive by themselves. So there are certain things that we need to put into perspective before we say we can let them do this or do that.
Okay.
Especially, another example would be working in a company where machines are involved. That also, we would put a disclaimer there and say, how well are the seizures for this person controlled? And do we have something from the doctor that gives us the confidence that indeed right now they can just lead their normal life and get about their businesses of the day? So it's a balance between how we have been able to control those seizures and how that person is moving well in their journey of recovery with epilepsy. We should not rush actually to just assume that they can now lead a normal life.
It takes time.
It takes time.
A lot of close monitoring.
Exactly.
Yeah?
Yes.
And I want us to talk about exactly that, how to manage those seizures. First of all, let's talk about treatment. And let's explain, is it treatable? Let's start there. And now take us through the form of management that people with epilepsy
that people can. the treatment and management of epilepsy has so many approaches.
Yeah.
I'm seated here today as an epilepsy counselor, and that in itself plays a very big role when it comes to the treatment and management of epilepsy. Of course, we have also medication that is by far one of the important things when it comes to the management and treatment of epilepsy. There is also the aspect of acceptance from the family and even from the society that also plays a greater role when it comes to the treatment of epilepsy. So yes, we have medication, we have doctors that actually are specialists when it comes to treatment of epilepsy, and they play a greater role in helping us understand what type of epilepsy one is going through, and actually what type of medication is supposed to be given to this kind of a person. When I bring in the aspect of counseling, it also plays a greater role in that there are people who will not accept that they have to take epilepsy medication for the longest time that is there for them. And so they would want to be taken through a series of counseling sessions for them first to accept. And once they accept that we have to live with this condition and even take anti-epileptic medication, then that's where their journey of recovery and management also starts.
So the mind is also very key.
Yes,
exactly.
exactly.
You have to really talk to them, change their attitude, to bring them to a point of acceptance, to even bring their families on board and people close to them on board before even the medical journey begins.
Exactly. And from that part is when you now begin to see a change in this person's life. Because you can be taking the medication, but if you are not aware of your seizure triggers, for example, if you are still taking medication and you are still taking alcohol, it might not really work out for you. If you are still taking medication, but you are working long hours and you feel stressed and fatigued, you might still be experiencing, seizures. If you are taking medication, but you are staying long hours, either watching TV, we have others who have what we call the photosensitive kind of epilepsy, where every time there are flashes, you've seen even programs on TV, they have a disclaimer, like we have a lot of flashing images, and if there's someone who has a photosensitive kind of epilepsy, they may not be comfortable watching this kind of a program. So that approach that every person needs to come together to actually help this person is very important.
Very important.
Yeah.
So I've come across testimonials of caregivers who say that the person that they have was not responding to a particular type of treatment. Does it mean then that we have different types of drugs, or what really happens? Can the drugs fail to work for one person and work for one person?
And work for another?
Yeah?
Yes, very true. I mean, at the onset, we are talking about different types of epilepsies, and this in itself already tells us that one drug or medication cannot either work for a certain type of epilepsy. And again, going back to the experience I've had with my sister, over time, we have really had to adjust and change the kind of medication that she's been using up to date. Different kinds of medication that have played different roles when it comes to the journey of her treatment and management of epilepsy. So it's true, and it's good that you asked that question, because most of the time when people have received an awareness like this, they're even looking forward to hear a doctor say this medication and this medication with names can work very well. And then they rush to buy that same kind of.
Because families want help, want solutions, and they want it.
Exactly.
They want it there.
They want it there.
You have lived with somebody who has epilepsy, and you can attest to the fact that it's not a very easy journey. It takes a toll on you. And parents are just out there looking for a way out.
It's not easy. And epilepsy is described as one of those chronic illnesses or conditions. Yeah. Actually, it's under NCDs as one of the non-communicable diseases, but is also regarded as a disability, you see. So I honestly understand, because there's no parent who would like to always wake up and watch their children experiencing seizures after every. So they would want to rush. And for that same reason, you have people also who, even this morning when I was coming here with my Uber driver, when I started the conversation in the car, he even recommended a pastor to take my sister too. You see,
who can pray until they
and I understand, because he felt for me. I shared how we have journeyed with my sister for all those years. And it's unfortunate that I had not gotten to that point of telling him that she's now managing it so well. Yeah, but you can see already they were recommending that I go to.
Did you tell them that you're a reverend yourself?
No, I didn't.
Anyway, on a light note, but then again, the reason I've asked you that is because some parents, after the medication fails to work on their child or a caregiver, once you see somebody is not responding to the medication, then you start hearing advice. Take this person to a traditional healer. Take them to a spiritual person to pray for them, because no medicine can be able to. There's been people saying that epilepsy is caused by bewitchment. Somebody has been bewitched, or it has been transferred from one person to another. Those kind of things. Do you hear those stories when you go to the communities, and what do you tell these communities?
A lot, let me tell you. I come from the coast, from Kwale County. That's my home. And I think the closest examples would be when we were struggling and trying to figure out how to help our sister. Yeah. There was this narrative where the community members were like, you have done something to your sister to behave the way she is behaving so that you can get riches. You see? Yeah. And so many other things across different communities. You have people talking and saying different things. Yeah. Again, with reference back to Malindi, where we have a center of treatment for people with epilepsy. We have people who come, they are so well diagnosed, they are put on very good medication that ends up to control their seizures, but they start that treatment and then all of a sudden you don't see them coming back for their clinics. And when you follow up, it's because someone went there and told them, stop taking this medication, let me take you to a place where you can be prayed for, something can be done to you, and you will not have to take this medication for life. And when now they stop taking medication for a while, the situation worsens. And by the time they come back, we have to kind of like start again from scratch. So we have this, and we cannot blame these people as much, to be honest. Yeah. And I think such opportunities as these to raise awareness actually come in handy, and they help people to understand that there are conditions where when treatment has been started, you just have to go by the doctor's advice. You can't even tell it to yourself that I will stop taking medication because I have stayed for like a year or months without getting a seizure. Oh, so even after you stabilize, you no longer have seizures, you cannot stop taking the medication. And one thing about epilepsy treatment and its medication, even the withdrawing of the medicine cannot just be stopped abrupt. It has to be done gradually. And with the advice of the doctor. And so you need to just be very deliberate when it comes to you having made a decision of starting the treatment for epilepsy. and walking that journey until a point where the doctor can actually clear you, because you have people who will take medication for the rest of their lives. There are those that will take medication for a prescribed period of time. And there are those that who would even outgrow the condition without necessarily taking medication, because we have seen all those kind of people. So you need to actually stick to the advice of your doctor, in the whole journey for you to.
I'm looking at it in terms of even the cost implication. Yeah, I mean, how regular do you have to like go for this consultation and the drugs? Like, you know, you have like a constantly taking these particular drugs. Talk to us about how that looks like in terms of cost.
It's one of the challenges that we are actually also trying to address. Having an opportunity to sit at the National Epilepsy Coordination Committee, one of our biggest mandate has been trying to see if this medication can be made available. Of course, we have what the doctors would prescribe as, first-line drugs that can be used in the management of epilepsy, which are not necessarily very expensive. But again, talking about these different types of epilepsies, you would not want to imagine that only one type of medicine which is cheaper can treat all these other.
You said about 40? About 40 types?
Over 40
types.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you have people who are under certain kind and types of medications which are very expensive. And again, you will allow me to keep giving reference to my sister, because that's a very live example. At the moment, she is using, I would call it a cocktail of medication that the other day we were trying to look at the cost implication for like a month, and would spend not less than 30 to 40,000
per month. For drugs.
Based on what she is using right now. And that could be different from any other person with a different type of epilepsy, because there is medication that is being sold as less as 2 shillings or 5 shillings. And because it's working for that particular patient at the time, it might not be as expensive. I mean, when you make the comparison between a person who is spending 30 to 40,000, there could be a person who is spending way less, like 5 or even 3,000 in a month. So it's really depending on the type and actually the advice that the doctor is also giving.
And what is also working, because you're saying that you have also had to change the medication of your sister over and over again.
Exactly.
So it also depends.
It depends on what is working for that particular
person at that time.
Yeah.
So as we close this conversation, how would you describe our health system in terms of resources and policies that address epilepsy, and sitting even at that committee, what would be your priorities? Because you know the cost, you know the toll it takes on the family. You've actually walked that journey. Yeah?
Well, to be honest, I think for the last 1 month or so, the conversation about health has really dominated. And I might not want to get so deeper into it, but with respect to epilepsy, this is what I would say. First, we don't have experts in this field of epilepsy. Actually, as far as I know, if we talk about epileptologists, I know of only 2.
Nationwide?
In the country.
Okay.
And they are closely, of course, being supported and helped by, the neurologists, which really help. And we don't want to say that the knowledge of epilepsy is something that because you have been to a medical college, then you are able to treat epilepsy. We need to actually start a conversation of raising the awareness that we need to have specialists that can help in treatment of this. But we are trying to address it from a point of National Epilepsy Coordination Committee. We have a countrywide campaign called Angaza Kifafa, where we do refresher courses to clinical officers, nurses, basics on how they can properly diagnose epilepsy and put people on medication. And so far we have gone to about 21 counties, and we are looking forward to see how we can be able to go to all other counties. We are training the community health promoters because they are in charge of households, and they can easily tell if there is a person who has been locked in the house because they have epilepsy and they have not been taken to the hospital. And generally now, the awareness that we do across. And again, from the policy perspective on now pushing for availability of anti-epileptic medication in our hospital, that is what we are also doing, including coming up with a national guideline that can guide on proper diagnosis and management of epilepsy in our centers. We might not be able to go to all the hospitals, but if this guideline is in those hospitals, then a medic who has a background, of course, of medicine, they are able to read through and do a proper diagnosis and see exactly what can be done to a patient with epilepsy.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. It was really good to have you. As we close, just tell people, somebody who has epilepsy has not been bewitched.
Yeah.
Yeah. Make that sink. Make that point really reach home.
Make that sink, yeah. So let me just take this opportunity to say that first, epilepsy awareness is an everyday conversation that we need to have. And again, if in a family you have a person with epilepsy, please take them to the hospital. There is medication available, and that can really be of help. And from a personal level, I continue to raise this awareness through, I do extreme sports expedition. I was just telling people the other day, I walked from Nairobi to Mombasa to raise awareness about epilepsy. And this year, I'm looking forward to climbing Mount Fuji in Japan.
Wow.
And that is after climbing Mount Kilimanjaro in 2020 to raise awareness. And so this conversation is coming out live. And also the stigma intervention program that we are rolling out with the whole team in Malindi Foundation People with Epilepsy is towards making sure that this conversation is heard across the nation.
All right. Speaking from passion, you're very passionate about this subject, of course, having lived the experience, knowing what it means to be a caregiver of somebody who has epilepsy. But the optimistic part is that she's doing well now, she is stabilized. So there is hope. There is hope that it can actually be managed and you can continue with your life. Asante. Reverend Frederick Ubeuchi, an epilepsy counselor and awareness activist. He also serves as the National Secretary of the National Epilepsy Coordination Committee. Asante once again. As we wind up the show, we also want to just caution you. This morning, we are urging caution on the roads following heavy rains last night. Now, in the CBD, Moi Avenue is blocked after heavy rains felled trees near Imenti House. The city county officers are making efforts to reopen it in Kitengela. Of course, now in Kitengela, the River Athi has broken its banks and made the bridge impassable. Have a look.
Bridge inaweza bomoka eh? Hata yule naye amerithi angalau kunamfanya hiyo maji na increase. Kuna mwenye amenini? Gari imekufia kwa maji kwa barabara. Sasa zimefunga maji inaanza kukuja na gari. Siacha hiyo bridge. Angalia item za watu mbele huko. Hii ni mkahawa.
And on Thika Road near Kahawa Sukari, the road is also flooded at the Juja underpass, so we urge motorists to exercise caution.
Sasa hii hata una risk wa nini? Kwa nini mtu wa risk hivi? Unajua utasimama inafikia kwa kidogo.
That's the situation across several parts of Nairobi. Take personal responsibility, take caution during these heavy rains. Now, the Kenya Red Cross says it has dispatched its teams to the most affected areas in Nairobi to initiate search and rescue missions. And on that note, that is how we close the program this particular morning. We really appreciate your time just watching Daybreak, and we continue to cover a lot that is of significance to you right here on Citizen TV. So keep watching. My name is Safin Acheng Oma. Have a lovely day ahead.